Okay, on my immediate right, let me introduce Erin McClelland, process improvement expert, consults for the healthcare and government agencies. She is the Democratic candidate for the 12th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. Erin. And to my far right is Keith Rothfus, the current Republican Congressman serving Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District. Keith was elected in 2012 and is running for his third term in office. And with that, Keith, your opening statement.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you everybody for being here tonight to participate in this great American tradition. Thank you to our sponsors, our panelists, and Ms. McClelland. Next month, the American people will go to the polls, and for the first time in our lifetimes, their votes will have a direct and immediate impact on all three branches of the government. And we have a choice to make. Whether we continue with the status quo, big government policies from Washington, D.C., or move on to the better way that we've been talking about in the House of Representatives on health care reform, tax reform, regulatory reform, and upward mobility. I'm looking forward to getting there next year to implement that plan and to continue the work I've been doing in this district, like leading to make sure that our local water infrastructure was included in the bill we passed last week. Making sure we're going to protect 5,000 Pennsylvania energy jobs, because those are middle-class family jobs that we're going to protect. And continue my work on the opioid epidemic with the bipartisan task force and getting what needs to be done. Thank you.
Erin, what do you say?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Congressman Rothfus. It's always a pleasure. You know, I got to give you all a lot of credit. There's no doubt that there's no shortage of debates in your life right now, so I'm sure that the last thing you were up for was coming here, listening to some state reps and some congressionals sit here and talk about taxes and all this great stuff. So I give you all the credit in the world for taking time out of your busy schedules away from soccer games and bills and all those great things that you have to do to come here and participate in this process. This has been an amazing experience for me, and I am really looking forward to doing in this process what I've always done, and that's stir things up, get people thinking outside the box, looking for new and innovative ideas on how we move things forward, and really bringing this district and this country into a new idea of what the 21st century of leadership, of government solutions, and what this nation could look like moving forward. Thank you so much.
Tom, your first question for Mr. Rothfus.
Mr. Rothfus, I'd like to start off on a national question, if you will. You've made it known that you support the Republican nominee for President, Donald Trump. Why do you support him, and why do you think he's the best choice for America?
Thank you for the question. Donald Trump wasn't my first choice, but this is a binary election. We have one candidate who represents the status quo, Mrs. Clinton, and a candidate who is not a politician. He says things that I haven't agreed with, but the fact of the matter is he's going to sign the legislation that we're going to put out on the better way that's needed to get this economy rolling again. We need a much healthier economy. We've been growing at 1% for too long. We're looking at tax reform, healthcare reform, regulatory reform, upward mobility reform to get this country back to work again. You know, the difference in growth rates is stark. You know, what we could be doing right now with a 4% economic growth rate and what that would translate to you and your opportunities and your kids' opportunities. More jobs, better wages, more opportunity, a better future for our kids and grandkids. I serve on the Financial Services Committee, and we have Janet Yellen, the chair of the Federal Reserve, come in from time to time. And for the last 18 months, it's been the same story. There are persistent economic headwinds she talks about. Well, those headwinds are coming from Washington, D.C. They're man-made. They're choking opportunities in western Pennsylvania. And so when you have the situation, for example, with the war on coal, where Hillary Clinton says that she's going to put a lot of coal miners out of work, I'm fighting for those jobs. My Sense Act, which passed the House, would save 5,000 Pennsylvania jobs and allow the environmental progress to continue on waste coal piles around this Commonwealth. It's that kind of a solution that we need to be pursuing. Those people want those jobs, they're taking care of their families with those jobs. President Obama said he would veto that legislation. That's too bad, because both Senators Casey and Toomey support this legislation. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation. My concern is Mrs. Clinton would veto that as well. Donald Trump would sign that legislation and could get this economy rolling again. Thank you.
Donald Trump also would add trillions of dollars to our national debt. That's been proven by economists on both sides of the aisle. In addition to that, when you're talking about leadership, yeah, I don't agree with some of the things he said either, and I don't want that in the White House. I don't want that leading this country. On some of the other things that Mr. Rothfus said, you talked a lot about coal, so has Donald Trump. I have to ask you why you've not supported the Reclaim Act. You've not publicly supported it. This is legislation that's going to take money that's already there, going to bring $340 million to this area. As a matter of fact, they've already started doing this work in Cambria County, where they've actually done a mine reclamation and they've created 60 jobs. They are taking rundown mines that are accomplishing nothing and they're investing in them, putting jobs in them and making them great and making us move forward. And I don't know how you can scream about the war on coal and not support the Reclaim Act. It's already working, it's already moving us forward.
Larissa, your first question for Ms. McClelland.
Ms. McClelland, you are part of a unique event for the Pennsylvania 12th Congressional District voters, where 3 women are on the ballot for President, Senate, and Congress. In Pennsylvania, there are currently no women serving in any statewide positions or in Congress, nor have they ever been elected to the Senate. Given that 50% of the population is made up of women, is this because there just haven't been any electable candidates, or is it something more cultural?
Thank you for that question. And I have to say that as a blue-collar girl from a blue-collar town where you're not used to people running for much more than maybe a township supervisor, to be on that ballot. I mean, it's always been a dream of mine to serve in government, to do some really creative, innovative things like what I did in the private sector. But to be here at this moment, to be on a ballot with not 1, not 2, but 3 women running for federal office for the first time in our country's history. It is an unbelievable moment for me. It is an incredible honor, and I couldn't be more pleased to be here. And I want to say to every woman out there who's been told that you can't do this and that there are no women and they're not electable, put your name on a ballot and fight your way through, because it isn't easy. We are held to a different standard. We don't raise money as fast. That is a proven fact that women struggle to raise money. Men don't donate to women as much as they donate to men. Women don't donate at all. But you know what? We're not going to fix this. And I don't think anybody in this room should vote for me because I'm a woman. I think they should vote for me because I work hard. I'm a fighter. And I absolutely love the idea of taking this job, running with it all over the 6 counties, and doing some of the extraordinary, incredible things that you can do for working families, for our schools, for our communities, and moving it all forward. And this is a dream of mine. And it can't be about gender. It's got to be about who you are. Donald Trump said that if you have a small chest, you can't be beautiful. Well, ladies, let me tell you something. The only thing about your chest that defines you is what's deep inside. So find what you love. Find what means something to you. Grab onto it and hold it with all you got. And you fight, you claw, you don't give up until you get it. That's how this is done.
I think it's great that we have women running for office. I think it's great that we have 3 women for these offices that are running on the federal level. But we want to make sure we're electing the right one. Look, I'm the dad of 4 daughters. I'm very proud of my oldest daughter, who actually ran for student body president at her college and won. And you can imagine the pride that I had when she called me and told me about that. I'm happy to support women who are running for office. I look at my colleagues like Jackie Walorski and the wonderful job that she's doing, and Martha Mansally, a fighter pilot. It's very important that we have that perspective in our offices. But we want to make sure that we have the right women with the right philosophy, because again, we need to get back to the kind of economic growth rates that are going to increase opportunities for everybody, for men and women, and our future. So it's great, again, to have women on the ballot.
Rebecca, your question for Mr. Rothfus.
Mr. Rothfus, under the Obama administration, the federal EPA and Army Corps of Engineers redefined the term waters of the U.S., or WOTUS, in 2015 to include ephemeral streams, ditches, low spots, dry gullies, etc., as well as the land that is adjacent to or abuts those areas up to 4,000 feet. In some states, this means the federal government gains jurisdictional control over as much as 96% of the land mass, and not only water. Should the federal government regulate land uses and activities, a right which belongs statutorily to local government?
No, they should not. The Waters of the USA regulation has many problems, and it's the federalization, really, of land use in our country. This is a serious problem, and as your question mentioned, an ephemeral stream. What is that? Well, think of a hillside, and a rain comes, and all of a sudden there's water flowing down that hillside. It's there for the rainstorm, and then it's gone. That's ephemeral. The federal government wants to grab jurisdiction over that. This is an example of regulation run amok, and this is an example of the headwinds coming out of Washington, D.C. that are affecting economic growth and putting billions of dollars of cost on families, on businesses, on family farms. There's a very simple, elegant bill to address this, called the REINS Act. What's important about the REINS Act are the regulations of the executive in need of scrutiny. It puts you back in charge again, instead of unelected bureaucrats that promulgate these rules. Why is that important? Because we're supposed to have self-rule in this country. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Not of the bureaucrats, by the bureaucrats, and for the bureaucrats. With the REINS Act, Congress gets to say. It puts you back in charge. And it's not going to be the end of regulation. It's going to be the beginning of accountability for regulation, because you get to exercise self-rule at the ballot box. So again, the Waters of the USA is a very problematic regulation, but it's just one. Regulations are going to cost this economy close to $2 trillion. We've got to make a change.
I'd love to talk about water, but I'll tell you what, we have laws, and saying Congress will have more control, I can't say that that's going to actually make me feel any better. Let's talk about water in this district, but let's talk here. Not right, not left, not Washington. Let's get all that out of the way and talk about water right here in the 12th. The ATI lockout, what happened? They shuttered Latrobe. When they shuttered Latrobe, the Westmoreland County Water Authority lost $1 million in revenue. Water rates went up 25%. That hurt real people in this district. Whenever the ATI lockout shuttered Midland, they lost their raw water supply. Water rates went through the roof. And the whole time that was going on, your congressman wouldn't even show up, wouldn't even stand there and sit down with them and say, what's going on? On top of that, you want to talk water. Let me tell you about my hometown, where we have a nuclear waste dump that the Army Corps of Engineers had to actually stop cleaning up because it was so bad, infecting the entire area. $500 million cleanup project, he's never shown up in a meeting once. That's water.
Tom, your question for Ms. McClelland.
Ms. McClelland, with your background in the healthcare industry, what specific plans would you propose on the federal level to deal with the opioid epidemic facing the country?
The bulk of what I'm going to do isn't going to be at the federal level. That's pretty much useless. We have the worst drug control problem in the free world as far as policy goes, and nobody wants to have a seat at the table. So I'm under no delusion that I'm going to be that one person that just goes to Washington and out of 435 makes it all magically get better. But what I am going to do is do on the ground here what I've always done. I started a treatment program. It was rated one of the best in the country, featured in Industrial Engineer magazine twice for being a state-of-the-art institution. I wrote the business plan myself, raised the $2 million in funding for it in private investment, got it approved, which everybody told me that I wouldn't get it approved because it was so innovative and so unique, and I got it started. That's what I do, and that's what we're going to do right here. You talk about jobs? You want jobs? You going to wait for a jobs bill? Really? Tell you what, let's start jobs. I'll write the business plan myself. I'll get the investment. We'll get you a treatment program right here in Beaver County. That'll create jobs. Counselors, accountants, HR people, executives, janitors. We'll bring them all in. We'll give them jobs. And at the same time, we'll have another round of treatment for your addicted population. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to write laws for it. I want to make it happen. And we can do that right here in Beaver. I can do the same same thing in Westmoreland, where they don't have a single inpatient unit. And then I'm going to do it in Johnstown, where they have the highest overdose rate in the state and the worst drug problem in the state. And they need it more than anybody. You want economic growth, you cannot do it with a massive drug problem. I've been recognized regularly as one of the top opiate experts in the state. Served on the Office of National Drug Control Policy's 25 Cities Initiative right here in Western Pennsylvania, where we were labeled one of the top 25 worst opiate problems in the country. We're going to start fixing that. I'm going to do that day one, on the ground, Washington out of the way, right here.
Yeah, this opioid epidemic is a tragedy, and it requires all hands on deck. I have worked across this district, going to treatment centers, going into police cars, watching the police do the work, and hearing from them the pressure that they're under on any number of issues. But visiting here in Beaver County, in Allegheny County, residential programs, outpatient programs. I'm happy to work on the House bipartisan task force, looking at this from any angle that we can. This is an issue that has melted away partisanship, it has melted away lines between government. Everybody recognizes the tragedy. I've worked with my colleague Bill Keating from Massachusetts, a liberal Democrat from Massachusetts, and conservative Republican from Western Pennsylvania, putting an amendment on our Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. This legislation is just the beginning. We understand that we have a long way to go, and we're actively engaged in it.
Larissa, your question for Mr. Wellington.
Mr. Rothfus, polls continually show that most people think Congress is broken and dysfunctional. Besides electing a Republican president, what do you think the problem is with Congress, and what is the single most important thing you can do to fix the underlying issues with the way Congress works?
It is broken, and I've been fighting the status quo since I got there. And one of the most significant issues we've been dealing with is the whole appropriations and spending process. This country now is on the threshold of hitting $20 trillion in debt. Let that sink in. Just 7.5 years ago, it was $10 trillion. What does that mean? Well, it costs a lot of money to service that debt. Right now, we're spending just under $300 billion a year on interest on the debt. In 10 years, it's going to be $830 billion, just interest on the debt. That's $100 billion more than we're going to spend on defense, $200 billion more than we're going to spend on Medicaid for our vulnerable populations, $700 billion more than we'll be spending on education or transportation. We've got to get a handle on our debt. We've got to get a handle on our spending. We have this default system right now in Washington, D.C., where it's government by omnibus, where they package everything together and basically you get one vote. One vote. Instead of the hundreds of votes that you should get on amendments and on individual appropriations bills. 1994 was the last time that Congress got it done on time. This has been a bipartisan problem, and it's a status quo problem. I've been fighting the status quo. We cannot do this to our kids and our grandkids. We want responsible budgeting, and I'm going to keep fighting for it. I told the voters 4 years ago that I was going to fight for this. None of my votes should be a surprise. We're going to continue to fight for fiscal sanity, for budget sanity, because we simply can't afford the road we're on. Thank you.
Fighting? Every time there's a fight, you shut down the government. Every time there's a fight, you go home. How can you say that's a fight? That's not a fight. A fight is when the Democrats in Congress go and sit down on the floor and say that they want gun control. And those of us that are Second Amendment advocates go home 2 days early. That's not fighting, that's powering out. I don't care if there's 200 Republicans or Democrats on that floor trying to take away your Second Amendment rights. If I had been Congressman Rothfus, I would have gone in and said, listen guys, I get it. We don't like people getting shot. But you know what? The terrorist watch list is completely unconstitutional and not grounds to take away a citizen's right to bear arms. That's the argument. Nobody made it. They shut down the government early and went home. That's not a fight. That's giving up. That's giving in. Your question was about why Congress is dysfunctional. That's why. We have stopped making an argument. We've elected a bunch of people that won't fight, they give up, and they run away.
Rebecca, your next question. Please. Your next question for Ms. McClelland.
Ms. McClelland, this is actually a very closely related question. So,
Oh, goody.
yes, you'll get another opportunity.
That one was so much fun.
We have seen an increasingly divided Congress that seems unable to work together or find common cause on many issues. After recently calling Mr. Rothfus to task for voting against a continuing resolution to keep the federal government open, can you tell us what, if you were in Washington now, you might be doing to understand the opposition on this issue and go forward in a bipartisan way? If you are elected, how will you bridge the gap between lawmakers?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm already doing this. I love to argue. I don't know if you figured that out already. And I love to talk to people that don't agree with me. So I called the Somerset County chair and I said, there's a lot of Republicans down there. I want to talk to these people. I want to talk to farmers. I don't spend a lot of time with farmers up here. She goes, well, we can send you to the Farm Bureau thing, but it's going to be all Republicans. You're going to be the lone liberal. And I said, great, bring it on. And I went and we had some extraordinary conversations about tax reform. And I found out that some of the tax laws that my party has put in place to make sure that the child of a millionaire doesn't get all this money and go and buy Lamborghinis are actually hurting small and medium-sized farmers because their assets aren't liquid. You know, their assets are estimated at $8, 10, 12, $15 million, but it's a piece of land with lots of buildings and equipment, and it's not liquid, so they're actually being punished. So I can now go to Washington, how devastating that thought is, I'm just kidding, and go there and say, listen, to my own party, this is hurting my farmers. So we need to adjust these policies so we can help them. I love talking to people who have different opinions than me on social issues, because what I find is that when you talk long enough and you argue long enough, you actually get to the point where you say, hey, wait a second, here's one thing that we agree on. And when I talk to the pro-life community, and I've done a lot of this lately, we're talking about changing some insurance laws that don't allow women to get, a pregnant woman to get reimbursement for counseling if she's really stressed about her pregnancy, which it's a life-changing event, let's face it. I mean, you're talking about caring for another living person. And I remember when I got pregnant with my son, I don't know how I would have survived without my mom, who's here today, really making sure that I wasn't terrified at this whole process. So there were some great things that we've talked about already. And then I want to go in there, find the inarguable goals. Healthcare, right, left, who cares? Let's stop killing people in our healthcare system. That's $1.2 trillion a year we're spending. And that's something we can all agree on.
I think it's important to work across the aisle. You know, I have a number of pieces of legislation that I have been pursuing, and particularly on this opioid epidemic, and you've seen people really coming together. But I think there needs to be more time in Washington, D.C. for members to develop relationships with other members. The schedule that we're on is very compressed. You go down on a Monday afternoon, we have our first series of votes on a Monday evening, you have hearings all day Tuesday, votes Tuesday, meetings Tuesday, same Wednesday, same Thursday. You're on the plane back to the district, and it's important for us to be on the ground in the district, working the districts, meeting our constituents, and hearing what's on their mind. But I do wonder sometimes whether we should be spending a little bit more time there so that we can develop those relationships. It's very difficult in the 18-hour days that we work in Washington, D.C. to have that kind of productive conversation. And every year I lead a delegation of my colleagues with Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat from Hawaii, over to Arlington Cemetery. That's one of our most special days of the year. It gives us a chance to really talk about what's been going on with our veterans and military issues.
But I've looked at a better way, and I can honestly tell you if I would have done it, I would have went in, done what I've done in the private sector. Teach people how to not commit medical errors, prevent hospital-acquired infections. That's what I do as a process improvement expert. Save us $1.2 trillion, funnel that money into covering the uninsured, use that protocol, put it into the Veterans Association. It's really not that difficult. We could have done it that way. That's the way I would have done it, and that's what I'm going to fight for moving forward. But the better way, you know what they want to do about healthcare? They want to privatize Social Security, and they want to turn your Medicare into a voucher system.
Larissa, your next question for Ms. McClelland.
Ms. McClelland, what is your position on the federal minimum wage that is currently $7.25 an hour? Should it be increased to a living wage amount estimated to be $15 an hour, or is it a local market-driven issue?
Well, I think it's both, but when you look at the living wage legislation, Davis-Bacon, these were two Republicans. These were two Rockefeller Republicans back when politicians actually looked at bottom lines and balance sheets and all that crazy business stuff that we don't actually acknowledge anymore. And these were two Republicans that said, you know what? If we actually make sure that these people have a living wage, they're going to have more money to spend on our friends' stuff. And that's going to make the economy more powerful. That's what they were going for. The Congressional Budget Office has shown that it will lift 1 million people off the welfare rolls, and I'm all for that. Yes, I think we need a progressive policy. I don't want to, commit shock and awe on our small businesses. I also think that we can write a policy that has exceptions in it, just like FMLA. So I ran a small business. FMLA says that if you go on maternity leave, then your office has to secure that job for somebody. But if you're under a certain size business, which I actually experienced this, I had a counselor, and I only had a couple of them, so it was really hard to go without one. And she had a baby, and I said, look, I would love to keep your job for you for the next 4 months, but I literally, it will take my business under. So FMLA has enforced policies that make exceptions for small businesses. There's no reason that we can't continue to put a progressive platform in to elevate the minimum wage, get our tax base up, help fund some of that money into Social Security, which this is our biggest problem there, and start generating real revenue while pulling 1 million people off the welfare rolls. This is a reasonable thing to do if you implement it properly, and the devil's in the details, I admit. But yes, I do, no, I don't, shock and awe to the system, do absolutely nothing to keep our tax base obliterated. Come on, it's not right, it's not left, it's local. We have local solutions. Small businesses do this stuff every day. We've done it before with FMLA and other policies. We can do it with this one too.
I've been concerned about one size fits all coming from Washington, D.C. You already see wages rising in some areas. UPMC has said they're going up to a $15 minimum wage. That might be fine for UPMC. That might be fine for some of the bigger companies. But it's not going to be fine for your pizza shop. It's not going to be fine for your pastry shop. It's not going to be fine for your local Main Street business that hires kids, high school kids, learning to show up on time, learning a skill, learning about service, learning about greeting customers. Those are very important life skills. And we do not want to do something at the federal level that's going to undercut that. You go into stores now, and you're starting to see a transition away from live clerks and into iPads. That's not good. I think that we're threatening a lot of low-level jobs, what's the bottom rung of the ladder of opportunity. And we've got to be doing policies that are going to increase everyone's wages, and that's where the better way comes in with our reforms.
Thank you. Rebecca, the next question for Mr. Rothfus.
Mr. Rothfus, I earlier asked Mr. Christiana to describe how the Pennsylvania legislature could help ensure that pipeline routes are managed with best land use practices. But of course, the federal government has a key role to play with national and international companies building interstate pipelines across the country. What will Congress do to hold these companies responsible for their local impact?
Number one, we've got to make sure that we're giving an appropriate oversight. We've got a terrible gas explosion out in Westmoreland County. I've been consulting and hearing from the Pipeline and Hazardous Substances Administration and the work that they've been doing, because we want to make sure that this infrastructure is safe, and if there's a problem, then they need to address it. And you see the owner of this pipeline now digging up hundreds of miles of pipeline to make sure that there's not going to be a repeat of the tragedy that happened there. But we have passed legislation already out of the House of Representatives, because one of the issues is that some of these applications for pipelines go into the federal government and you never hear from them. We think there should be a time limit on which the federal government has to act. If the federal government decides that it's not going to approve the pipeline, then let the pipeline company know why, so they can take corrective action and reapply. Right now, if you put in an application, you have no idea when it's going to come back. We all know the famous case of the Keystone pipeline out in the middle part of the country, Keystone XL pipeline. That took forever, passed any number of reviews. It was good to go, except this administration and its war on fossil fuels decided no, they're not going to do it. There is a responsible, prudent way to do this. We want to make sure that the agencies have the resources they need, and it's not just this particular agency I was talking about, the Army Corps is involved, and other agencies as well. So I think when you look at the reform legislation that we propose, it looks to streamline this so that we can make sure that these pipelines are going to be built to get this gas to market, because there's a tremendous opportunity for our state to really lead the world. This is the Saudi Arabia of gas. We have allies in Eastern Europe who could use this gas, but we got to get this gas to market.
There was a Department of Energy study, cradle to grave study. This was not the Environmental Protection Agency. This was DOE, and they did a cradle to grave study on the environmental impact of liquefied natural gas if it were to be shipped to China and Europe for use in their power plants. It was purely looking at the environmental impact. That study showed that the environmental impact would be half, and it advocated for building pipelines that go from here to there. This is an export of our liquefied natural gas. It creates jobs, skilled labor. Mr. Rothfus passed an amendment to bury the study. This was something that advocated for gas jobs here in Western Pennsylvania and said that not only could we create jobs and export an unbelievable product and get those exports through the roof, but we would also decrease environmental impact. He passed an amendment that buried the study and then was very proud of that.
Tom, your next question from Ms.
Ms. McClelland, the NRA has been running television commercials claiming that if Hillary Clinton is elected president, she would take away citizens' right to own guns. Do you see that as an accurate assessment of Clinton's stance? And what gun control reforms, if any, would you support?
I'm not a big gun control advocate because when it comes to social issues, I really am very libertarian. I don't think that banning abortion is going to decrease it. I don't think banning drugs has had any impact. It's probably made it worse. And I don't think that banning guns is going to stop gun-related crime. And if you look at most of the gun-related crimes we've seen, a lot of them are due more to mental health issues than they are to legalize purchases of weapons. Do I think that Hillary Clinton is going to take away their Second Amendment right completely? No, because I think that even if she tried, the Supreme Court's going to overturn that. And they've been pretty good when you look at things like the DC gun ban that they overturned. We do have a system of checks and balances in this country. And most of the time, they do get it right. So I don't think she's going to do that. It's never going to pass. Ever. I mean, she can try. I don't think that's ever going to pass. The House is never going to let it through. But what I do want to see is aggressive mental health reform. I love Tim Murphy's mental health bill. It's one of the cleanest bills I've seen. I'm a big supporter of it. I've talked to him about it. I think that would be great. But I think that what the NRA is doing is pretty typical of what you see of any super PAC or any special interest lobbying group. And they make an extreme case for what they're arguing for. And people on my side do it too. We have this really extreme, hyperbolic, if you don't do this, then the world's going to implode. Mr. Rothfus' fundraising emails are full of this stuff. He's always saying, if you don't give me money today, he's got like 10 times more money than me, but if you don't give him money today, like the world's going to implode and America's going to fall apart and your way of life as you know it is just gone. The hyperbole is insane. I don't know how you take it all the time. I feel sorry for you all sometimes, because it just gets so nuts. How can you actually have a real conversation about anything if you're not so absolutely insane about your beliefs to one level or the other? We can't get anything done.
Larissa, your next question.
Did you want me to?
Oh, sorry.
Jack?
Step on
Yeah.
it.
We do have to address the issues on mental health. This has been a serious problem. We look at these horrific mass shootings, and always there's a mental health issue. I was proud to support Tim Murphy in his efforts to get this legislation through. But one of the concerns I think we have with respect to Mrs. Clinton is right now the Supreme Court is deadlocked 4-4. There was a decision not long ago called Heller, in which the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the right to keep and bear arms belongs to the individual. The counter-argument was that no, this is related to belonging to a militia in a state. The Supreme Court said no, this is an individual right that people have. The next president will be appointing Justice Scalia's replacement. It's very easy to see that a Hillary Clinton appointee would think differently of the Heller decision, overrule it, and take away that individual right.
Larissa, your next question for Mr. Rothfus.
Mr. Rothfus, can we discuss the fact that the communities of Aliquippa and Beaver, both located in the 12th Congressional District, are reeling from a recent shooting involving a drug deal gone bad? What role does Congress have in trying to solve the drug and firearms problem with teenagers?
That's a great question. And we're all continuing to absorb the horrific scene of teenagers being trapped in this kind of situation. We have to do a better job. You know, the CARA legislation that we started with is a good beginning. That deals with the heroin epidemic and opioid epidemic. This, I don't think, was heroin, it was other drugs. But we have to really work on cultural issues and respect for human life, respecting each other. And it's important that we engage our communities. I join a peace march every year in Johnstown dealing with this very issue. I think the work at the Franklin Center, the Fatherhood Initiative, making sure that we are connecting families together. You know, families have been under a lot of stress. Not just the last 2 years, not just the last 5 years, really the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. We have to do everything we can to create a culture where families are going to be respected. We have to be reaching out to communities where families may be broken, and to provide role models, to provide individuals who can show kids a different way. You know, I'm very excited because this weekend, if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, I encourage you to do it. Congressman John Lewis is coming to Swiftly. He's going to be speaking at an event sponsored by the Student Art Center, talking about his work in the civil rights movement. If you can't make Saturday evening, he's going to be down at the August Wilson Center on Saturday afternoon. But to have a leader like that come to Western Pennsylvania is very exciting. And to remember what led the civil rights movement, that was a faith-based movement. You know, we got to be engaging our churches. The Peace March that I go on in Johnstown is affiliated with the church. Do everything we can to make sure these kids have access to a good education and strengthen families.
A culture of respect, Mr. Rothfus, on Tuesday night on panel, I was on, you had a representative there, and I was asked, we were all asked, about an issue regarding a woman's reproductive rights, and your representative referred to women who are on my side of that issue as Hitler-esque. That was the word. That is hardly respect. So on that issue, I think in our politics, we have to start showing respect there. I think that would be a good place to start. Second, on the issue, you mentioned earlier about the right to have a well-regulated militia. One of the things that you hear the NRA talk about is you need to own a gun. So if the government should come into your home, then you can protect yourself. So in that argument, isn't it inherent in that argument that it is okay if you feel that you've been attacked unjustified by a law enforcement officer, that you could shoot a cop? Isn't that inherent in that argument?
Rebecca, your next question for Ms. McClelland.
Ms. McClelland, you've actually referenced it several times here tonight, and you've described yourself at a recent chamber meeting as pro-choice, saying you love the unborn and support what you called a better choice than abortion.
Yes.
What criteria would you use to determine if a piece of legislation or a congressional appointment would offer this better choice instead of leading to unnecessary termination of pregnancies?
Sure. So this issue for me comes from when I started working at St. Francis Medical Center. They had this great substance abuse treatment program, and they used the profits of it to fund what was called a PAC program. This was a non-profit program that they funded, and what the nuns there taught me was that you cannot legislate morality, and you certainly can't legislate a decision people make when they are scared, feel alone, and are desperate. And they felt that they could prevent far more abortions by providing these services to pregnant women. So that's what they did, and I got to do some research on that program, and I just fell in love with it. They brought women who were addicted, and detoxing a pregnant woman is an unbelievably difficult thing to do. You could really do harm to the woman and the child. And the care that they provided in this program was astronomical. They got them good prenatal care. They made sure they got nutrition. They slowly got them detoxed off drugs. And after they had their baby, they made sure they got good postnatal care. They were put into facilities that we actually got donations to fund, and they were able to be there with other women who went through the same program. And knowing that, in addition to the fact that since I was born, abortion was legalized when I was born, or before I was born. And 5 times the Supreme Court, we've created legislation to ban it, and 5 times the Supreme Court has overturned it. So here's the thing. I want to, not safe, legal, and rare, I hate that phrase. I want to eradicate it. I don't think making it illegal will do that. What I do think is if we do things like what the nuns at St. Francis did, I think we have a better shot. Those women prevented 100% of those abortions. That's eradication. And that's what I mean. More choices, not less. Better choices, not more. I don't think an abortion ban will work. I don't think gun bans will work. I don't think drug bans work. They just don't work. And they're going to get overturned in the Supreme Court. So let's try something different. Let's think outside the box.
Again, this is an issue that highlights the importance of the next Supreme Court appointment. Now, several years ago, the Supreme Court did recognize that it was okay to have a modest restriction on abortion, dealing with partial birth abortion. There are some areas where we agree. We have legislation that we have been pushing for pain-capable children. These are children who can feel pain in the womb. And the idea is that these children, at least, should be protected. This is our foundational right. You look at our Declaration of Independence, you look at our Constitution, the first time you see reference to a right is the inalienable right to life that we are endowed with by a Creator. That's part of the fabric of our country. President Kennedy, in his inaugural address, talked about our rights. He said our rights do not come from the generosity of the state. They come from the hand of God. We've got to do everything we can to build a culture of life. Hillary Clinton says she wants to end the taxpayer ban on funding of abortions. That's not the way to go.
Erin, your closing statement, please.
Thank you very much, Jack, and thank you again to all of you for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules. And thank you, Congressman Rothfus. I think that we've talked a lot tonight about, some of the traditional stuff we see. I'm just really frustrated with all of it. I'm 41 years old. I haven't seen one really great piece of legislation, one really great piece of policy passed in my lifetime that solved a major issue. When I was born, Social Security was where it was, and it just got worse. The national debt was where it was, and it just got worse. All these problems keep getting worse. What I want to do is I want to do it on the ground. I want to restore the idea of a congressional leader back to the aristocrat of the local elected. On the ground, running around, talking with all of you, hearing your problems, having regular town halls outside the hours of 9 to 5 so working people can actually show up. And I have a funny feeling when I do my 6 in the first 100 days, I'm going to hear a lot of screaming and yelling and fighting because there's a lot of frustration, and I don't blame you. But we're going to do this together. We're going to create jobs together here. We're going to solve this opiate crisis together here. We're going to do all that right here on the ground. But doing it that way, instead of relying on Washington to do it, that's a lot harder. That takes a lot more energy and a lot more work. And I'll tell you what, 8-hour workday, bring it on. I'm looking forward to it. I barely sleep. I'll run around like crazy. And I've been working that way to get this job, I promise. That doing it, I will work 10 times harder. I will fight for every one of you, not just the people I agree with, but I will especially listen to the people that I don't. And together, I promise you, we're going to find some great solutions to our biggest problems. We're going to set a real example for what Congress can look like to transcend gridlock and do it ourselves, govern ourselves, solve our problems ourselves, within, using our own ideas, our own techniques, and our own communities. Thank you.
Keith, your closing
Jack, thank you. 4 years ago, I was elected to Congress, and some of you may remember an ad that I ran called Alice and Alice. It was about my mom, and it was about my daughter, my youngest daughter. And I talked in terms of meeting the commitments we've made to our seniors, and talked about not leaving our kids with debt that they cannot handle. The answer to both of those questions remains the same. We need a much healthier, vibrant economy that, as President Kennedy said, will be a rising tide that will lift all boats. We put out a Better Way propositional platform. Speaker Ryan has been very clear. Let's be the party of proposition, not the party of opposition. Show people where we would take them with pro-growth tax reform, pro-growth regulatory reform, healthcare reform that's going to put you in charge instead of bureaucrats back in Washington, D.C. Taking a look at our anti-poverty programs, engage in upward mobility. We have spent $20 trillion since the 1960s, and the poverty rate hasn't moved. What do we need to be doing to get people back in the game again and encouraging people to pursue life's work? Because I'm convinced we need everybody out there engaged. Because every time we put somebody back to work, they're paying Social Security tax. They're paying Medicare tax. When we're growing a healthy, vibrant economy, we're going to be able to afford to keep our commitments that we've made to our seniors, to our veterans, and what we need to do to make sure we have an adequate defense in a very dangerous world. Our fight goes on. I ask you to vote for a better way on November 8th, and I'd be humbled with your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, President.